this into the kitchen. All right, so she's good. And then we'll put this away. And break up her. We can throw that out. We can throw that out. We can throw that out. So this, she's only doing this for half an hour. So
Okay.
it'll be-
Well, I mean, I can give her some, obviously, if anything, I can go read over the drone manual and everything.
Yeah, I mean,
if that works.
that's entirely up to you.
Or I mean, if you have something for
Try to
me.
go out and recalibrate that,
Oh, okay.
and maybe Corey would. Oh wow.
Yeah, I can try and recalibrate it. I have to go get it. It's in my car too.
You want to go get it?
Yeah.
He's got it.
I'm gonna go grab it.
It's been saying it's magnetic, you know.
Yeah.
And
Is it so? Mhm.
yeah.
So would we have to go out to like a field out further away from the buildings?
Jared
Or?
said something about it. Sometimes if there's trees and structures around,
Yeah.
can't do it. And we tried it. We rotated it this way and rotated it this way. And it didn't work.
I mean,
So I thought maybe you've got your app, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you could take a look at it.
Yeah, okay.
All right. I'll see if we can grab it.
Hey, Michelle,
Hey, Michelle.
can you hear me?
I can.
I can't hear you, so let me. Oh, okay, I had the sound. All right, Georgie's going to sit in here.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks for that article too yesterday.
Yeah.
That made sense about the
Yeah.
flipping classroom. Yeah,
This means thinking about it differently than we probably do.
and it's
So,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
that explains it. So I have something for you that I said I'd get for you, and I don't know when I'm going to see you to get it to you. It was something you liked at your house, and I finally.
Oh, I know what it is. I know what it is. Yay!
I may drop it in the envelope and send it down to you.
Okay.
It was there.
The little things in life.
Yeah, really. I saw it and I thought, I know who I got to get this for.
Oh, how sweet. Thank you.
So I'll get it in the mail or something.
Because when I take these off, when I'm in the shower and I take these off, and I don't know why, but these companies all put little tiny.
I know, and they all look alike. So
I can't tell you the number of times I put cream rinse on first.
are
know.
you coming up anytime soon? Are you going to be up here at all?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm not scheduled to.
Okay, all right. I'll figure something out.
Okay.
I'm good.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
Good morning.
I'm just testing for Georgie.
Yeah. That sounds
I'm
good.
gonna just quick run back and see if I can catch the dean before our faculty meeting here. So I'll join you back in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, Emily.
There it is.
All right, we'll get that done.
I don't know if you can hear me yet. You look frozen.
She likes, she knows the story now. It's like,
So let me text Wanda and see if she wants to do something separate or do something,
she could take care.
or she wants to go in with us.
Okay,
And I'll let her know that Mary is not. Are
okay.
you presenting for that?
She is, yeah. You're ready to go there, dear.
You need the money? No, you can
So we're.
But you're welcome. If you want to give me some money. We can put your name. Well, listen. I got you.
Oh.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to give it another minute or two to see if we got more people joining us. I'm seeing new little blocks pop up as I speak, so we'll come back in 1 minute and we'll get started. All right, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the December 1st Friday. I am up in the Newcastle County Extension office in their conference room today. I know it's an exciting time of year with a lot of holiday festivities going on, and I enjoyed walking around their building looking at their doors that are decorated for the holiday. So you know they've got a judging contest for that taking place sometime soon too. I want to welcome, I don't think he's on today, but welcome to Extension Caleb Scott. He is our new extension agent for 4-H After School program. And I also want to say welcome to Dr. Emily Ernest. I heard she had a very successful defense of her PhD earlier this week. I wasn't able to attend, but I heard she did a great job, and I'm not surprised by that whatsoever at all. So that's so exciting. I'm very happy for you, Emily. A couple quick updates. I know everybody's aware of this, but we got planning and reporting deadlines looming. So by the end of the year, all of the reporting needs to be done. So while technically it's December 31st, it would break my heart to think that any of you are working on that over your holiday break. So hopefully you get it done by December 20th, which is, I know, probably the last day that a lot of folks will be in the office. Then plans will be available for editing early next week. I had hoped to have it done this week, but I don't yet. So as soon as I get that done, I'll send an announcement out. You guys can start working on that, but we want draft plans submitted by January 15th so supervisors can review them and approve them, and you can get started on reporting in February. Also a note about January, so the January 1st Friday, I have decided to not hold on the first Friday, not on the 3rd. We're going to do it on the 10th. I think there might also be a couple of people who take those extra 2 days off, so we'll wait till we have more of a critical mass for the January 1st Friday. So again, January 10th will be the first Friday. And I think that's all I'm going to keep my announcements to for today. I want to go ahead and turn things over. Our speaker today is Georgie Cartanza. She's going to share her Nuffield experience for us. I know she recently completed her fellowship for that, so I'm excited to hear about that. And then we're going to try to wrap early and allow as many of you as possible who are able to go ahead and join the faculty meeting for the College of Ag and Natural Resources. So I'm going to copy and paste the Zoom link for that into the chat box. So as soon as we finish up, we can all click over and hop into another Zoom room and participate in the Cantor faculty meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Georgie.
All right, I'm going to see if I can get this to pop up and share. All right, can you see that?
Not yet, nope.
Okay, all right. All right, hold on 1 second.
Hey, Michelle, can you show me how to share this? Okay.
Absolutely. You have to skip out of it first. You have to hit share screen. Oops. So you hit share like that. And you tell your desktop which one. You don't have any sound on your computer, do you?
No.
Okay. And now they see what's inside the green bars.
Okay.
So now you can go to your play from start. There you
Okay.
go.
So now you can see it? Okay. Alrighty. So this morning I'm going to share with you a little bit about my Nuffield journey. And initially I want to just talk about, the process, but then also talk about what was actually in my project that I studied for my topic. So just a little bit about Nuffield. William Morris is the person who, he actually became Lord Nuffield. But bottom line is that he had a bicycle shop that he also built motorcycles in, and he eventually started building cars, and it was called Morris Garage. And he actually came over to the U.S. and spent some time in the Ford factory to learn how they build things on a bigger scale and more efficiently. And so he really valued the idea of experiential learning and and sharing ideas. So he never had any children, and so he became quite wealthy, and through philanthropy he decided to start this scholarship. And so there are other types of scholarships, not just farming, but also medical scholarships and things of that nature. But this has been going on for quite some time. And so I actually got the opportunity to be the first U.S. Nuffield Scholar. If any of you are familiar with the MG car, that's where MG comes from. He was actually the developer of that. So that just shows you a little bit about the Nuffield Farming Scholarship. I was the first one from the U.S. We've had a couple more since then. We're kind of an expansion team right now for Nuffield. Most of your scholars have been from Australia and the United Kingdom. And the year that I was a scholar, there was 80 scholars from around the world. So the idea of Nuffield is really about inspiring people to make a difference in agriculture. And so the idea is that, it's really agriculture is the foundation of a stable society. We need people and leadership to really, and expertise to stay competitive and serve society in those areas. And if we don't have stable agriculture, we don't have a stable and safe food source, then we don't have peace or a productive society. So that's really the fundamentals of what Nuffield is trying to accomplish and develop individuals to be able to do that. So the way the process is you start out, you go to a Contemporary Scholars Conference, and really what that is about learning the values and vision of Nuffield. And so I did that in Brazil. Each year that changes from year to year. And you really learn about yourself, you learn about the other Nuffield scholars, you reflect on your strengths and your weaknesses, and really how you handle conflict, because it really sets the stage for you to spend 6 weeks with people you don't know and travel around. And it really is kind of like a combination of The Amazing Race and Survivor, but nobody gets voted off. So it really is a pretty neat opportunity to do that. So we really got a good overview of what Brazilian agriculture is all about. We've had farm visits. We spent a lot of class time. We focused a lot on succession planning because a lot of the farms in Brazil are quite large compared to the U.S. And so they are really, truly businesses, and that may have multiple levels of generations that are working in them. And so that was really a good opportunity to learn about that. We learned about trends in global agriculture. And really, it's about taking a perspective on agriculture, not just from our day in, day out task, but really from a 30,000 foot level to really try to understand how it's all interconnected, the impact that we have on the environment, on the economy, and so on. So it really, for me, I've just come off working on the farm. I really have only ever been focused on poultry. It really helped broaden my horizons and my perspective of other types of agriculture. And also talked a lot about the challenges facing agriculture. And a good example would be, we now have the opportunity to collect and gather all this data. And who owns that data? And should somebody pay for it? Who should have access to it? So there were lots of good, really thought-provoking conversations about how do we utilize that information? So that really is what the Contemporary Scholar Conference was all about. And being that I was kind of part of the expansion team, there was the US, the Netherlands, Brazil, South Africa. we each had to get up and give a presentation, a little short tidbit about what agriculture is in your country. And one of the biggest questions I got, because this was shortly after Trump took office, is what is wrong with you guys that you elected Trump? So, and really recognizing that I was the only American in the room for the most part, most of the time, it came with some challenges because, they have certain perceptions of us that hopefully, that didn't ring true with how I interacted with them. So you go from the Contemporary Scholars Conference to the Global Focus Program. And so this was the other people that I actually traveled with. And I'm just going to go from left to right. Christina, she's from Canada. She was an agronomist. Glenn, he was from Australia. He's a shrimp farmer. Brendan is a dairy farmer from Australia. Cameron is a beef farmer from Australia. Then there's Ryan, who is from New Zealand. He is a dairy farmer. Daniel is a cotton farmer. And then the guy at the front is Roland from the Netherlands. And he was actually a pig farmer. One of the largest pig farmers actually in the Netherlands and in Germany. They have over 800,000 sows that they have on their farms. So I want you to remember the first two I mentioned, because I'm going to tell you a little story about them later in my presentation. So, as I traveled, I really was looking for, things that kind of related to extension and, where there are these similar things that were out there in other countries. And really in Brazil, that was the only place that I found that. But we visited a place called Embrapa Research. And so this was a group put together back in the 70s by the Brazilian government to try to further along Brazilian agriculture. And they really have been quite successful because they've taken soil that we would have had the tendency to think that it really wouldn't be fertile or productive. And because there's so much clay in the soil, they've added what they've needed to at quite a cost, but it retains those nutrients. And so this is just showing some of the different research they're doing. They do a lot of research with sugarcane. The reason why Brazil is such a world leader in corn and soybeans is because they have developed varieties that work well in their environment. So on the lower corner is Silva Pasture, where they're doing a lot of work with livestock, forage, and trees all in the same areas and having quite a bit of success with that. The environment is so conducive to growing crops there that there are some pasture that will grow 6 to 12 inches a day. So it really works well as a forage. Over here to the opposite side of the screen on the right-hand side is actually where they're doing work with palm oil, and they're actually looking at different ways of doing irrigation. So we got to see a lot in Brazil as we traveled around. We went to a farm and this guy was kind of doing his own plant breeding. But let me back up. Embrapa also, they kind of are very similar to Extension, and they're trying to connect the knowledge that they learn with the general population and the farmer so that they can be more productive and successful. But this guy was doing some of his own plant breeding. That's examples of it there on the right-hand side of the screen down here. And he complained about, I talk to research, but they don't ever get back to me. And we've probably heard that before. But this was just some of the different stuff he was working on. No matter where you go in the world, farmers are quite proud of their soil and very passionate. This guy, he spoke Portuguese, so everything had to be translated. But this was on a quite steep hill, and he actually goes out and collects grass clippings from where they're mowing alongside the road to put that around his orchard. And he got down on his hands and knees, dug down in the soil to just show us how rich and how good that soil was from all he's doing to invest in that and build the quality of the soil. And then this is just a little picture of some farmer ingenuity in Brazil. Very much of the farmers there use cooperatives to sell their products and to gain what they need in terms of supplies. Unfortunately, Brazil is still a developing country. There's a tremendous amount of corruption. And if they were to get the corruption piece in check and their infrastructure from a transportation standpoint, they would be even more dominant in the world market. But because of that, it really holds them back. But farmers that don't participate in cooperatives really are on their own as far as getting paid. And a lot of them end up going unpaid if they sell their products without the cooperative. So from Brazil, we traveled to Mexico, and our whole mantra in Mexico was wheat is neat. We visited Summit. They have over 150,000 different alleles of wheat. And I don't know anything about wheat, but it was quite interesting to spend that much time looking at that. And we learned a lot about Dr. Norman Borlaug while we were there, and just, you know, how important, again, that stable society is based on having food that's available, it's safe, and affordable. So this is the Emily of Wheat Research in Mexico. And so it just, all the different things that they were doing was just, it was pretty amazing. Like I say, I'm not familiar with plant breeding or a lot with crops. And honestly, after going on the Nuffield, I thought if I wasn't doing stuff with chickens, I would definitely want to be an agronomist. So it was really interesting. From Mexico, we traveled to Washington, D.C., and we got to, what was really interesting for my other fellow Nuffielders was to get to see the access that we can have to our political representation and the opportunity to have that conversation. And they really appreciated how much our representatives from Delaware value the importance of agriculture and how supportive they are of it. And so that was neat for them to see. We then traveled to New York and we went to Cornell, where we talked a lot about consumer demands, how consumers are changing, learned a lot about different research things they're working on, and really what Extension's doing as far as really trying to help farm families work their way through that succession planning, which is just one of the pictures of that I took of one of the screens we saw, because that can be very challenging for farm families to transition and move from that. Then we traveled to Ireland, where we actually, and one thing that Nuffield does is it gives you access to people and areas and places that you might not necessarily have access to. So we got to visit Coolmore in Ireland, which is one of the major breeding, I don't know what you call it, but breeding places for stallions that are racing stallions. And so Galileo is actually really there. We were not allowed to take any pictures of the actual horses, but Galileo is in a stable where there are like 5 cameras watching him at any given time. And we did get to see him leave his stable and return, where he was going to perform his duties in retirement, which is to, you know, make other horses. And so each time he does that process, he can get anywhere from $200,000 to $800,000, depending on the quality of the mare. And so we actually saw him as he was coming and going from that process, which took maybe 20 minutes. And so it's pretty lucrative. We also got to see the owner's suite, where there was the Triple Crown and all the different awards that have been won and trophies from the stallions that have come from Coolmore breeding. So that was really interesting. The other thing was, and something that's neat about Nuffield, is you really get the opportunity to sit down and talk to people who are in business who've maybe experienced some of the same challenges, you know, and what are they doing to solve those problems. And so this is where, you know, hey, you can go on the internet and you can learn about anything, but when you can sit down and you can make a connection with people, that really makes a big difference. And so that's really the benefit of a Nuffield, and be able to travel and make these connections. And so this lady, she'd actually, she developed this brand, and this is how they've taken their dairy business and grown it and made it more profitable. In France, we looked at equipment cooperatives. France is highly subsidized. We saw a lot of solar, a lot of highly subsidized solar. And so, so that's some of the stuff that they have there. Farmers there, it's a much smaller scale, and they look at themselves as we're about quality, not quantity. And so that's really their focus. But again, this farmer is very proud of his soil. He was actually turning it over so that we could see the worms that are contained within his soil. They don't till very deep there. They do conservation practices, but that was quite interesting to see in France. So, so we also went to a bull sale. I won't show any pictures of that, but that was really interesting. Again, very much high value products. And then from there we went to New Zealand, and in New Zealand we saw all types of different kinds of farming. An incredibly beautiful place. We saw deer farming and lots of sheep farming. We saw fish farming. Many different things that, you know, that just what they're doing with irrigation, how much more critical their use of resources are. And that's one thing too that I was really impressed upon, is just how conscientious farmers are of water and those resources that are so limited. And again, maybe because I'm more focused in poultry, and we do have an abundance of water in our area. The guys from Australia talk about, you know, how limited they are and what they can use for irrigation. So it gave me a much greater appreciation for the challenges other places have, even other places in our own country, but just a better value of that overall. So so that really that kind of was the Global Focus program in a nutshell. We saw a tremendous amount. Again, like I say, it's like the Amazing Race, and you start first thing in the morning, 7 a.m. and you're traveling and you're, visit after visit after visit. And then, and I've seen lots of dairy cows in my travels. So this just shows you, no matter where you are in the world, the dairy cows don't look that much different. So France, Ireland, the US, Brazil, New Zealand, they're pretty much all black and white for the most part. And so, and then this just on the bottom of the screen is showing a 100 cow rotisserie rotary that I saw in New York, which was, for somebody who's not been around dairy farming, that was a pretty incredible thing to be able to see. So then that kind of closes off what I did on my Global Focus program. And you're not necessarily looking for things that are going to be on your topic. I only saw one poultry farm in that whole 6 weeks of travel with that. And then what you do is you transition to your individual study. And so on my individual study, I actually visited Israel. The Munters is a major player in terms of agriculture and ventilation for poultry. And so they are the ones that came up with the Rotom Environmental Controller, which a lot of those are used here on Delmarva. I also visited the Agritech Israel conference and got to hear a lot of good talks about conservation and sustainability. While I was there, I ran into a lady who works for the Ministry of Agriculture and does poultry research. So I went and visited her location. And also while I was there, I met with Tevlov Poultry. And so it really was a great experience. And for as much as I learned about poultry, just getting the opportunity to go to Israel and see the culture and just the different things. And some of the things I saw while I was there, I got to see where the fish were turned into to feed the multitudes. And so, like I say, just tremendous to get that, have that opportunity. When I went to Tevlov Poultry, I'd actually given myself a lot of extra time to get there because it was quite a ways from Tel Aviv. It was supposed to take an hour and a half. And so I gave myself like 3 hours. But when I called the guy, I got there at like 10 o'clock. The meeting was at 11. And we just couldn't connect because, of course, the language is different there. The signs, it doesn't even come close to looking like any type of English. And so I struggled to find the place. And the guy kept telling me that I needed to take the road to Jordan. And I just was not getting it. I was struggling with that. And so I kept trying to tell him where I was, because everywhere over there's a roundabout, and he wasn't understanding where I was, and I wasn't understanding how to get where he wanted me to get to. And so after about 2 hours, I finally gave up and said, look, I'm not going to be able to get there. And I apologized. And so finally, after almost giving up and telling him, he actually came to look for me, that I didn't want to take that road to Jordan. And so I finally, I was like, you know what? I said, Jordan border. So I was like, I'm just going to go down here. The border is probably not right exactly at, as soon as I got around this roundabout. And so I finally took it, and probably 1,000 feet down that road was the Tevlov poultry plant. So I did get to spend the whole afternoon with the veterinarians that done the presentations, and we talked a lot about antibiotic-free production and what they're trying to do over there and the experiences we've had here in the U.S. But there was a lot of things I saw that afternoon that I would not have gotten to see if I hadn't taken that road. So for me, it was like one of those, stepping outside of your comfort zone, because this whole process for me genuinely was stepping outside of my comfort zone, because I like to be at home. So traveling and then traveling abroad by myself was quite an experience. So, so again, just a tremendous opportunity. I also, in my individual study, went to the Netherlands and to Germany, and this is their idea of outdoor access. So these are considered organic free-range chickens that are allowed to be outside, which is totally different than what we perceive them to be in the U.S. In the Netherlands, you cannot be an organic poultry farmer if you have more than 5,000 chickens, which is very different than what we're doing here especially in Delaware and Maryland. These are just some pictures of what it looks like, just a little bit different techniques of feeding chicks early on. And across from my hotel in Amsterdam. When I looked out the window, this was the restaurant that was across the street from me, the Dirty Chicken Club. So I thought, wow, that's perfect. I must be at the right hotel. And so, like I say, a great opportunity to visit there. So I'm going to transition a little bit now to really kind of talk about what is, my topic and how it's going to benefit, hopefully, what we learned here. For those of you who are not really familiar with the poultry industry, we grow almost 10% of the poultry in the U.S. right here on this little Delmarva Peninsula. And so it's important that we do things that are going to keep us sustainable in the long run. So I'm running short on time, so I'm just going to kind of pop through these real quick. But because I really want to talk about the technologies that I got to see. But we really do need to understand that the impact NGOs can have. Because one of those farmers I met in Israel or in the Netherlands, I asked him, if you knew something different today that you didn't know 30 years ago, what would you have done different? And he said, I would have told my story. And it really, for me, really shored up my commitment that we need to engage with the average person, the general public, to really explain and help them understand what we're doing in agriculture and how we do that. So, so that really, it really, like I say, hit home how important that is. So we really need to engage, own, and showcase what we're doing. We can't be afraid to explain, hey, I can understand why a consumer thinks that we're giving chickens hormones and steroids, but I have to take the time to explain, how did we get there? And, what are we doing for environmental stewardship? So here are a few of the innovations that I saw in my travels. Chickens oftentimes in hatcheries do not receive anything to eat or drink for 6 to 12 hours after hatching. In an antibiotic-free world, that's critical to the gut health of the bird. So one of the things they're doing in Germany that I got to see at a hatchery I visited, and we are starting to do a little bit of this in the US and Pennsylvania, is we give these birds early chick feeding, where we give them access to feed and water soon after they hatch. And so this is an improvement and can help with the intestinal health of the birds. It does make it less stressful, but there's some extra challenges. This is quite costly, and it increases the chances of mold issues in the hatchery, which can be a real concern for bird health in the long run. The next thing I saw was actually on-farm hatching, which I really think could be a game changer here for us in the US. A poultry farmer might not want to hear this, but from a gut health standpoint and from a long-term, bird health, animal welfare, I think this could be a real game changer. This was a piece of equipment I observed on a farm. It's called X-Track. But of course, it's a piece of equipment, and that comes at a cost. But something that I thought was incredible, and it's so simple, was this next one was Nestborn. And I got to visit a farm where basically at 18 days of incubation, they take the eggs, they transfer them to the poultry house. This is actually inside the poultry house. They put down some fresh bedding material. They bring the transfer machine that they would actually use in a hatchery. They retrofit it, and they can place these eggs right on the floor of the house. So immediately when that bird hatches, he's got access to feed and water. And there's no transportation that they don't have to go through sorting and all those pieces that occur in a hatchery. So it's less stressful to the bird. It's less handling. Immediately they have access to feed and water. And so these little units right here actually are measuring humidity and temperature and bird activity. As they start to hatch out, they'll send an alarm to the farmer so that they know if humidity or temperature is not where it needs to be, or it also lets them know when the process starts. Because there's a window. All the chickens are not going to hatch out at exactly the same time. And if they sit in a hatcher at the hatchery for a period of time while they dry down, you have some birds that actually become dehydrated. So that's where the benefit of this type of technology could really be a benefit to the integrators, but also to the poultry farmer. Something some of you may not know, and this kind of transitions to more egg laying production, is that there are over 7 billion male chickens in the layer industry that are euthanized each year because they serve no purpose. If you look at the difference between the conformity of a broiler in terms of meat production versus a laying hen, the purpose of them is to lay eggs. So we really don't have the meat production. So even on the male, the boys are not laying an egg. So they really serve no purpose. So in the layer industry, this is about a $1.4 billion loss a year. And so there's a new technology that actually puts a biomarker on a fertilized egg before it's ever incubated. They can identify whether it's a male egg. And so I think this could be, from a consumer perspective, most people don't realize, okay, we got to hatch these chickens out and then we euthanize them. And they can be used as protein, but a more humane thing to do would be, hey, we identify them before they ever hatch, and then they can go to be eggs that we can actually eat. And so, so it doubles hatchery space, it saves incubation cost, and so, you know, overall it saves feed. Like I say, just a savings all the way around. So I thought this was a tremendous innovation that I was able to be exposed to. We also are going to have a lot of changes in this industry, looking at data availability. And right now, the way we measure temperature in poultry houses is the ambient temperature. But we don't know, we think we know what chickens are, if that's comfortable, but we have to go in and observe their behavior. So there's a lot of artificial intelligence that's now being developed. The one thing, this is Chicken Boy, it actually will map out all the humidity, the moisture of the floor. It'll identify where dead chickens are, where there are called chickens, if there's a leak, and it sends that information back to the farmer so that they can know immediately. One of the things when I was in Israel that the lady was working on at the research is actually taking thermal imaging and how do we translate that into how our environmental controllers can react in the chicken house. So they're working on algorithms that can actually provide a better environment that's better for the chickens. It's really what the chickens desire for it to be. So this is probably going to be one of the big game changers as we move into the future as to how we monitor. And really, we think about precision agriculture. We may not really think about that in livestock, but really that transition to being able to incorporate that into our livestock model. Here's just another one of those artificial intelligence where many things are alarmed in the poultry house: temperature, humidity, if we run out of feed, if there's too much water, if there's not enough water. But it may take time. There'll be a delay in the farmer knowing that that's an issue. And one of the things that FAMCOM has developed is this thing called iNamic that actually looks at bird distribution in the house. And it will alarm you sooner, much sooner than what a traditional alarm system would, because birds are their behavior is going to tell you something very quickly. If there's no feed, they're going to move away from it. If there's no water, they're going to move away from it. So that bird distribution, if they're not comfortable in temperature, it's going to change your distribution. So this I also see as a technology that's going to help us evolve from an animal welfare standpoint, but also from a production efficiency standpoint, that we're just providing that bird with a better environment that's more consistent and just better overall. One of our biggest challenges here on Delmarva, because of our close proximity to all this water that we're surrounded by, is, what's going to happen in terms of emissions. Air emissions is probably our next biggest challenge. One of the things I got to observe in the Netherlands was the heat changer, and that does help reduce and mitigate some dust, particulates, and ammonia. We have not been very successful with manure energy. I got to see some of that, but most of what I saw it was not dealing with chickens. Most in the Netherlands, if you don't have land to apply your manure to, you have to pay to get rid of it for it to be used for energy in those other locations. So there's some opportunities. We need to look at other alternatives to use a manure, but this here is kind of a rough idea of what an air scrubber could be. And it just is kind of some mesh with some mulch in it. And this is something I'd like to try here on, close to fans and see, hey, how much impact can we have? So it really opened my eyes up to thinking about out of the box, thinking of, okay, what can we do different that maybe doesn't limit and restrict airflow out of fans like a traditional air scrubber would. Another thing, just looking at composting and what we do with how we manage dead bird mortality. I got to observe, this is called in-vessel composting, and it simplifies composting because all you're doing is you're taking the birds and a carbon source like pine shavings. You don't use any manure. It actually reduces the volume of compost by 80%. It's much more forgiving than traditional composting, but it does come at a cost. I actually have adopted this technology on my own farm, and so it's about $50,000 versus spending $12,000 to $15,000 on a traditional composter. But the quality of material and the consistency of material is a tremendous improvement over what traditional composting is. And I look at this as something as maybe it's an alternative to freezers if a grower wants to adopt new technology. So it definitely has its place. And the NRCS is now actually funding and cost sharing this particular type of technology here in Delaware and in Maryland, that if farmers would like to adopt it and there's funds available, they can utilize this technology. So I know I talk kind of fast. I've told you a lot of stuff. I saw a lot more things that I can't tell you everything in 25 minutes. But, traveling, if you're not comfortable with it, like I said, it totally took me out of my comfort zone, but it definitely was worth its while. And I'm blessed that I had the opportunity to do the Nuffield. And then I mentioned those two folks earlier in my presentation. She's from Canada. He's from Australia. I'm pretty sure this baby came by way of Mexico. I may have been present, but about 10 months after our Nuffield, Amelia was born. And last year at this time, they actually got married. So you never know where life's going to take you. It was a tremendous experience for me. And I'm grateful that the university was willing to let me do it. Mountaineer helped sponsor, the Department of Agriculture helped sponsor the trip, and also Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit. So I'm grateful, and like I say, it had definitely made me a stronger, better person, and certainly more well-rounded, where I wasn't just so focused on poultry. So with that, I don't know if anybody has any questions or any comments.
I thought that was just amazing, and I think a lot of really fascinating technologies I've never thought about. So thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, and if folks want to ask Georgie questions, certainly please do. And then if others are itching to get over to the faculty meeting, you can hop over to that. Anybody? I guess not. Well, thank you so much, Georgie. I thought that was great. And I saw that you are on the program at Ag Week too. Are you doing a similar presentation or the same one?
Yeah, I'll probably focus more on the technologies and talk about a few more of them. Not as much about maybe, all the different things I visited, but maybe really try to stress, like how much we share in common with, no matter where you go in the world, farmers are actually struggling with the same challenges, consumer challenge, changing, and their demands, and their expectations, building that connection, soil, we sometimes we think, oh, it's just us, but it's not. We share those same concerns and values and challenges, regardless of where you travel in the world. And farmers are the first environmentalists. So and that really was impressed upon me, no matter where I traveled. So that was really, like I say, that to me is, I think, is really the message, and that we're all interconnected, and that we're all in this together.
That's great. I love it. So I'm glad you're going to be able to share that with the Delaware growing community too in January. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And if folks do have questions or follow up, you know how to get in touch with Georgie. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great first Friday and a wonderful holiday. And we'll see you in January. And remember, the January 1st Friday will be the second Friday, January 10th. So thanks, everyone. Take care.